I'm only telling you.
Sarah, you could show us how to do that. It's pretty easy. You just push a button.
You just push the button up here, the red, it's like a red circle on the screen, and it'll say it's not recording anymore.
It's not recording?
Yeah, it'll say stopped.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
We could do that. Well, I probably can't because I'm too short. Jessica's probably the tallest in the room. Everyone here.
Okay, thank you.
You two are gonna have to compete.
Okay. Call meeting to order, special meeting, I guess, of the village board, just an informal discussion about budget and before we go into our budgeting season, which is coming up very quickly, probably a week, 2 weeks. Which starts with the long range plan. So I just quickly wanna say, and I know David told me not to talk too much, that, the reason that I think it's really important is, in all honesty, and I thought Ann might show up too, but, we never get to sit, because anytime you sit and informally talk, usually it's in the boardroom, and literally it's one item after the other. So this is just a chance that I have a lot to talk about for the budget, there are questions, and I just wanna get them out there, and as we move through this season, we'll still have another, at least 2 together, and so, it'll help to regroup every single year and do the same thing. So, doesn't mean you have to agree with what people say, it just means that we're gonna talk about it and see if we can get a better understanding of what we can do throughout the year to shape where each of you want it to go, including yourself. So, David, you're the budget chair for the year, for the committee, finance chair, so if you wanna start and lead, that's fine, I have some stuff to say, but I can wait.
I didn't have a chance to look at the second quarter at all, and like I said, I didn't listen to you guys talk about it, so I don't know. I feel like since you guys are new, and I think the long range financial plan, I know Wes, you met with Mark, right, and Rebecca, did you, Jessica?
I met both of them.
Okay, so it's a little bit confusing, like especially the way it starts. It sort of starts and then folds back on itself, you know, like the facility costs are all go in, it's kind of all to figure out, like, but I mean, I think basically it's like, how much debt can we carry? You know, how much debt do we wanna carry, how much can we afford to carry? So I don't know, I mean, I'd rather focus on the long range financial plan, but, and just talking about it and how it's structured, and then I spent some time today going from last year to this year, looking at what has changed. But, if there's it's informal, so if there's other things that other people wanna talk about, I'm up for that too.
Okay.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that, and just sort of share, and then going through
And one of the things that
and asking questions and going through. Like, I didn't come prepared with any specific questions right off the bat. If that's
Okay.
what- Were you? Okay.
No, I mean, the other
just
thing
that.
too is to kind of give an overview of the
Yeah.
budget, like the whole way we approach it, because we have, like, my first year, we probably had 7 meetings that we sat in this room and like went over every single budget unit, and it's, the nice thing about it is it's the department heads come in, and it's like the one time of the year where, you know, you can talk to Rachel at the library and, you know, talk to every single, you know, and really get a chance to ask about how their year was and what's going on and what their issues are, you know. So it's the one time we really connect with each department, which is great.
can I just say one thing? So just as history, and I caught on after my first year, but we haven't at the village of Shorewood, which is rare, but we haven't had any budgetary real problems. I mean, there's not, every year we haven't started, that I've been here, with a gap that we have to fill. So unlike, and I brought the city of Wauwatosa, you know, the county, the city of Milwaukee, the state, they start with saying, this is how much we're negative this year, there's a gap. They start all the way in April, and then they have to go through. So we've been quite lucky. What I'm seeing as the trend this year, and why I wanna talk about it and have David help us, is that when we start with the long range plan, we can look at the debt, and it's the first time there that we've actually, that I keep seeing every year, it keeps getting pushed up, the fact that there's a negative bounce, which means there's a gap, based on the fact that we owe so much debt. And so, saying that, the budgeting practice, people, you know, it's very hard to make changes when you're ingrained in, we need to keep the level of services that we have. And my question to everyone is, I see it coming, it's now moved up to 2026, it was 2027 last year. So it's creeping up, meaning it's getting closer and closer where we go negative before we start, and that's with a 2% increase in taxes. So I'm asking everyone to, like with the lens, you don't have to agree to it at the end, but with a lens of what, we don't have a lot to change, and I'll just explain, I'm on the fire board, and their capital planning, did I bring it? I think I brought it, but policy is much different, because they also know they start with a negative.
Okay, this year was different. Mark included this, debt service schedule for current and projected debt, which was not in last year's report. And so.
Which page are you on?
Page 3 of the current one, of the, long range financial plan. No, that's
Oh,
the
there's a
half,
comprehensive,
yeah.
oh, I didn't see that.
I have it.
It's on,
Okay.
yeah, you can pull it up, yeah. And he didn't have this schedule, so we have this, debt stabilization fund. Do you got it, you know how that works, right? Like we have 40% of our revenues in reserves.
Mhm.
So, I
Over the
don't know,
years,
a couple of years ago, and we don't need more than 30%, you know, so, I mean, Moody's loves it that we have 40%, but to me, that's a lot of tax dollars that people have paid, that we're just kind of sitting there, you know, not doing, I mean, 40% of our total property tax, it's a lot. So a couple of years ago, the administration came up with the concept of let's use that money like every year, so if our debt service would go up 10%, we'll subsidize 5% of that with reserves. So we'll keep a steady increase in our debt service of 5% by taking reserves and subsidizing until to keep us at just a 5% increase.
But to supplement that, 30% we keep, and the policy says we keep, because we need it really to keep our bond rating, because we have so much debt.
Right,
But the anything above that is what Dave was talking about, is the reserve that we can use to subsidize our
Well,
payments for
yeah, I
that.
said it was 40,
right,
it's
so
actually
it's-
42 or 43%, so.
Above, so really it's 12% above where,
It's about $1.5 million,
okay,
that's what it
but
is.
it's that, like, so that 30% we need,
Yeah.
but you're saying we're at like 40, 42.
Yeah.
So it's a 10, 12%.
Yeah, different.
Okay.
Do we cut into that every year as we service more debt? Is that what's?
Well, we just started doing it last
Last
year,
year.
so I think last year we put in
35,000.
300, so if you look on this page, it's 344, where are we? So last year, stabilization support, it's the 344. So now,
I don't have the most recent one, I have last year's.
Oh.
Did you pick me up a copy?
he said he didn't make you a copy.
Okay.
Well, it's online, you guys, we sent it to us. We need to get it. We can just look from this one, it doesn't matter. So we start with 750, and then next year,
That's total reserves?
total available tax levy stabilization. So next year, to keep us at only a 5% increase, we need 278, then 252, 240. So by here, we need 309, but we, current year stabilization needed 309. So yeah, we still have some, so we run out in 2023. And then, so one thing that I had a question about is, he keeps the debt service at going up at 5%, but we've run out of stabilization funds.
Yes.
So we have a negative. Well, we can't have a negative, you know, we have to have a balanced budget. So to me,
That just means you have to raise taxes.
well, to me, yeah, I would put it up in here, and I would show it, if we don't have
Right.
stabilization funds, I would show it up here rather. So as we go through all this, we have to remember that out of 2024, this is an artificial number because it's just at 5%, but our actual, so we actually owe
So,
total levy debt service is 2706, but we're only, in our budget, we only have 2339, and we have this deficit, so this is a little bit of a funky
So-
number.
Has there been discussion with Mark about what happens in 2024?
I'm assuming, okay, so one thing was, first of all, I don't understand, yes, we've tried to talk about that at at board,
Mhm.
but last year was the first year that even Guy Johnson realized it goes negative. So it took us like an hour, and he finally was like, oh, you know, we run out of money. So, my thing is, last year, it was when I was here, it was 1.5 million in reserve, so you're saying it's starting at 750, I would like to know that answer
Yeah,
at
why
that
is
point.
it 750
That's half.
and not
And
more?
we haven't been spending, we didn't spend half, so it must be, my guess is last year we had an audit, so there's also this OPEB liability, which is your other, employee benefits, like for people that retire over 64 before we changed the rules. And there's we have like 64 people that are not retired yet. So when they retire, we owe them this pension that, you know, not pension, I'm sorry, other health liability that we now don't for newer people. And it's a significant number, not as big as Milwaukee or anything, I can't remember the exact number. So that might be where some of it went, because we were required to put in like a fund somewhere for that liability, but, I haven't heard what we've done for that, so that's on my list of questions, which is, what are we doing based on that audit for, liability? Because if you see, there's like a little bit amount, that says at the bottom of assigned funds, and it says 80,000 for retiree healthcare. That's not going to cover those 64 people when they retire.
What do you mean, in the 2018 budget?
Whenever we get to the budget, there's unassigned but reserved funds.
Well, okay, that's a little bit, of a meander, but anyway, overall, there's less in here in terms of when you start looking at the actual project list. It's also, there's things that were in our plan last year there's some things that are added, and then there's things that are missing. And
all that means to me is, last year it was 2026 when we ran out of money. This year we've lessened our obligations by pulling these projects out. So when you do the calculations, it should go down how much money we need, and now our payments still moved up to 2023. They're still moved up 3 years for
What payment?
running out of money, the reserve.
the
I don't
debt
understand how we have
stabilization.
less costs.
Well, I don't think we should be modeling what we're gonna actually have to pay in debt service. I mean, if we don't have the if we've run out of debt stabilization, then we should show that what we have to pay is we're not gonna have anything left to fund it, so we should show it at the higher number. I don't exactly understand why that decision was made. I mean, to a certain extent, I think this is sort of set up to give an idea of how much we can bond for, what our debt capacity really is, and then say, okay, given that, what projects are we gonna do? And
My fear with it is, though every year I say I feel like it's a false sense of security, because we do it, it's a long range plan, it's supposed to be for 20 years, and we look at like 3 years worth, and we fudge the numbers
it's
to
only
make,
for 10 years.
and then
It
there's
goes
an
out to
out column.
2028.
Yeah. Then there's a column for out years on our spreadsheet every year.
Yeah, but he doesn't do all this stuff. I mean, I don't know.
So anyways, but even it translates also into the CDA to show that our debt payments start going down. Do you remember that graph?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so I don't like, I wanna show reality, like, I really want, if we're gonna do long-range planning, let's do long-range financial planning and put all the expenses in there and see what the real number is. I'm a planner, so that's what I believe. Go ahead.
And can I say, so basically the upshot of this to me, I'm just trying to boil it down,
Mm-hmm.
is that at these numbers, we won't be able to maintain the 5% stabilization baseline come 2024.
Mhm.
So something has, we need to get this number, we have to either impact services, or a 5% baseline has to go away, but we have to get to this number somehow, some way, is that?
That is absolutely correct, and so I just wanna redo what Wauwatosa does, because we've been saying this for many, many years. I said it last year during budget. I would rather have, if we have a structural budget deficit, or a structural deficit, right? I would rather address it every single year slowly, like a 1.5% reduction, than come 2024 and you have like a $500,000 gap, like,
So it's almost like a balloon payment.
right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to read you what Wauwatosa does, because he was our budget director at the county, and he writes these memos in April and June, and he basically, of course, I don't have the one where I circled it, but, he talks about there's a structural gap. He completely is up on us and says, you know, it's important that we do this every year gradually, because exactly what I just said, you don't want a big, you know, change. And every year they have to come up with, you know, more new ideas on what to do. And what I like about that is if we have to, until we have new administration in the governor's office or whatever, because our levy limits and expenditure limits, we're borrowing so much, until things change, I just feel like we need to be educating, you know, like, because otherwise, you're gonna be, if you have to change a level of service for any reason, let's talk to the residents and say, which one, you know, like, give us some ideas,
Well,
but
if you look at
I
this
think
page.
it's the what, it's the understanding the why, it isn't the
Why,
what.
exactly.
You know, I don't know that we need to take this as like, this is definitely what's gonna happen in
No.
2025, because, you know, we're gonna continue to add to the surplus, so it could,
Right.
so, I mean, basically,
We have
because
some
generally
choices.
speaking, we spend less than we take in revenues. I mean, and that was one objection I had, was like, yeah, that's a good thing, it shows we're being prudent about our budget, but at the same time, we were building and building and building and building this pot of money, and we need to spend taxpayer money, we not sit on it. So, but, I mean, I think we need to recognize that this is just kind of a model to give us some sense of, you know, if expenses continue at this rate, and if revenues continue at this rate, this is what'll happen. I mean, if this were actual fact, I mean, we would get to 2025, and we'd go from like under 2.5 million, we'd have to jump to 2.937. You know, we'd have to jump from this line, 15 to the line 10, because that's without stabilization.
what's the assumptions that went into that? It was a 2% increase in tax levy, right?
They assume assessed value goes up 2%, they assume expenses go up 2%, I believe. And then he has the actual debt service from, you know, the debt that we've issued. I assume that's all net, the TIF stuff is all over on one side. So this is just general fund type debt that we have to pay with the property tax levy. So he has the actual debt service from when we issue the debt, we know what we have to pay, right?
So I asked him to run, I've been asking consistently, run it at 0 tax rate increase, because I just wanna see what that does, like what does the gap become? We've not been successful in getting that done yet, but I think they're working on that.
Sorry.
I found the paragraph, it says, as a result of the differential between revenues and expenditures, the city will face an annual budget gap. If fund balance were simply used each year to balance the budget, that's what we're doing, the gap would grow to 4.5 million by 2023, and unreserved fund balance would be exhausted by 2020. As a result, it is imperative that the budget gap is addressed each year through sustainable changes, as the city has done successfully since 2011. Balanced approach is recommended that focuses on expenditure reductions, revenue increases, and economic development that grows property tax. And then he gives ways to do it, but every year they go through this exercise.
I mean, what's happened in the past is that they usually come with, you know, budget at 1 3/4 or 2.25% levy increase, that balances. And that has, negotiated raises and whatever they feel inflation is and blah, blah, blah. And then, I mean, one of the issues, you know, we've had is we don't really have much discretion to say, you know, can we cut this, can we increase that, you know, and that's one of the things that in the 0% levy increase, I guess what I should have been more clear when I asked for that initiative was 0%, but with a 5% upper and a 5% downer. So we'd have a little more leeway instead of just like, okay, here's the budget, it's a 2%, and we can't help you anymore.
And just so you know, they do this, like, if you look at TOSA, the county does it, city does it, state does it. They ask every department to do a reduction of a certain percentage. They don't necessarily take that. So, but every year that the budget, because the assumption I was always taught was, if our healthcare numbers come in greater than we expect, because if we budget a 0% healthcare increase or whatever, forecast it, at the end, when they come in, we don't want 7 trustees sitting around a table trying to pick from line items what they think would make the most sense. It's just not good practice. It's better to have the administration who knows how their department functions to be participating in that. And so it sounds really scary, but it's actually, I think, a better budgeting practice in the event that we need to reduce taxes.
So, as the community that has the second highest amount of debt in the county, in a perfect world, how much debt should we have? Because, and how do we, I mean, in my mind, and I think of debt as something that's generally not good, and I think of how my family likes to spend money. But, so that to me makes me very nervous about the health of our finances, that we have one of the most amount of debt in the county. And so how do we start moving that? That's, I think, for me, like the big piece is like, how do we start moving that needle? How do we make us what I think is a healthier financial community? And I don't know that that's an answer
Well,
for
I
tonight.
mean, half of our general fund debt's TID debt, which we just have to stop tiffing.
Right. Right.
Which, I think we've done quite a bit in terms of economic development.
Yeah.
But the other, the problem is, the other stuff, we borrow people borrow when you have to make a really big expense and you don't have cash on hand. And, well, even like the water meters, okay, we had discussions in Public Works Committee a couple of years ago about should we borrow to do the water meters, or should we do it more gradually and pay cash? I'm a big proponent of cash, because when we borrow, we're paying almost, the equal amount of interest. Or do we even want a special assess for water meters? Like, I think we could make an argument to residents, like, instead of your property taxes paying $500 for this, do you want to pay $225 today in cash, just like you would get assessed for a sidewalk or something else? It's on each house. Now then the argument that's raised opposite is, well, but what if you sell your house next year, then the person who moves in hasn't paid for it, you've paid for the entire improvement.